Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reedsy. So today we've got the second part of our Q&A. We asked you guys for questions, and today I'm just going to continue going through those questions and answering them. They're on a range of topics from writing, publishing, editing, all of that stuff. So if you missed the first part and you're looking for your question, I'll leave it linked in the description. And if your question doesn't come up in this part, it might be in part 3. Do UK and US literary agencies accept manuscript submissions from abroad? Do they represent people who don't reside in any of those countries? Many US or UK literary agents represent international clients. It's very, very common. If there's an agency you're interested in, just go to their website and they will probably say that they accept international submissions. Can I submit writing that I do in my creative writing classes to literary magazines? Do I have to get my professor's permission first, or can I just go ahead and submit when I feel ready? You absolutely can, and you absolutely do not need permission for anyone. If you write something in a class, in a seminar, in a workshop, whatever, that work is yours. It is fully yours. It does not belong to the prof, the instructor, to anyone else in the class. You do not need their permission because they have zero ownership over the work. They cannot control what you do with the work, and they probably don't want to control what you do with the work. So you do not need anyone's permission to submit your work, right? Unless you wrote it in like a group project or something. But as long as you're the sole author, you can do whatever you want. You don't need anyone's permission. But if you do write something in a class and it gets published, you should definitely tell your professor if it gets published, because they'll be super happy for you. Do you think you need to master traditional writing before you go on to more experimental writing? I think master is a bit of a misleading word in this question. Do you have to master traditional writing? I mean, how long does it take to master a skill, right? You know, some would argue that that takes like a lifetime to become a master of your craft. Do I think it's good to start with traditional writing before moving on to experimental writing? Probably yes. I would say in most cases as a writer, beginning with simpler, more traditional, more straightforward work will allow you to focus on craft and have a really solid foundation for craft that then you can start to get more experimental with. Do I think you have to be a master of your craft? No, but I do think it helps to start there. That will give you the tools that you need to start being more experimental. What are the basics for writing action or fight scenes? The best way to write action or fight scenes is to give your character a goal within the fight scene. Just general action where the character that we're following through that action isn't trying to get anything or do anything specific can start to feel kind of boring. At least from my perspective, I don't really enjoy reading action, to be honest. I glaze over as soon as there's a battle. So I personally think the best way to keep action and fight scenes purposeful, keep the scene propulsive and moving, and keep up a high sense of stakes is to give the character a specific thing that they want. You know, sometimes it's just that they don't want to die, but I think giving them something specific they're trying to do, you know, if they're in a battle and they have to get a specific thing or they have to rescue a specific person, that gives so much more weight to all the obstacles they encounter along the way. And then in terms of the actual action, the main thing you don't want to do is like a blow-by-blow action. Then with his right fist, he swung a punch at my face, but I ducked under it and I drew my knife and I swung it at his left, like etc., right? Pick and choose the actions that you demonstrate carefully. Write out the emotional responses, right? The emotional response in an action scene is so high. You can use really strong, punchy verbs and short sentences to illustrate that the character is in a state of really heightened adrenaline and everything is really intense. Think about all the senses they're going around. It's probably very overwhelming. So really get into the senses and the emotions that they're feeling rather than just focusing on the external action. You can still use the external action, you know, to block out the scene and to keep track of what is happening. It shouldn't be the only thing in your action scene. Your action scene should be a blend of the actual physical actions and choose the ones you want to show, you know, specifically, and also how the character feels emotionally. All the senses around them. That's going to keep the stakes really, really high and keep the scene really, really engaging. Dialogue is a major part of building a character's voice, but if we are non-native English speakers or we don't use slang in our conversations, what can we do to improve our character's dialogue? I think the best way to improve dialogue, first of all, this is like a very common advice, but try reading it out loud or get it read out loud to you. You know, get someone else to read it out loud. You can put it through like word text to speech. Listen to what your dialogue sounds like when it's read out loud. In general, dialogue in fiction shouldn't sound exactly like spoken speech. You don't want to replicate spoken speech. Spoken speech, you know, where people pause and they use a lot of, you know, verbal quirks like the word and stuff, you know, all those filler words that are not really words that we use when we're thinking. You don't want that in your dialogue. You actually want the dialogue to be quite clean. You don't have to include a lot of slang in dialogue whatsoever if you aren't familiar with it. In fact, if you're not familiar with it, I'd recommend not including it in your work. Pay attention to dialogue in TV shows that have really good dialogue. Listen to podcasts, read fiction out loud so you can hear what the dialogue sounds like. There's such a difference between reading on the page and hearing it to really help you understand how dialogue works and how it fits together. How should I write emails to subscribers? What should I write in them and how should I make them interesting? We have actually an entire video on how to start a mailing list, so I'll leave a link to that. A few brief things. First of all, don't bombard your subscribers with frequent newsletters if you don't really have anything to say. If the purpose of your newsletter is just to update people on your writing career, then you only need to send out a newsletter when you actually have something to share. Like when you have a cover of your book to share, when pre-orders are up, if you have some kind of publication or interview or podcast that's come out. If that's the purpose of your newsletter, just write those updates when you need to write them. People don't really like getting a ton of emails, right? So don't feel like the best way to manage your mailing list is to create constant updates, because you don't have to. There are a lot of writers whose mailing list I'm subscribed to and they only send out updates when they have updates. And sometimes there's months without a newsletter, and that's okay. When I see the email in my box, I'm like, oh, I want to know what update does this person have, because I'm invested in their career. But if they were to send me constant emails all the time, I would cease to care and I would probably unsubscribe. The fact that a lot of writers who the purpose of their email is just to share important updates about their work only email when they have important updates about their work, when I see the email from them, I know it's important and I want to click on it. But if it's constant, then I just unsubscribe because they don't have substance. I would say if you want to create a consistent newsletter where you're emailing, say every week, every 2 weeks, whatever it is, then you need to find a niche outside of just your writing career, because probably people don't need weekly updates about your writing career. So some kind of advice column or, interviews with other writers. If there's an area of writing that you know a lot about, let's say you have a background in magazine publishing, maybe you're going to do weekly just quick magazine publishing. If you want to have very consistent, frequent newsletters, there needs to be substance and a reason that people are subscribing. You don't want to just create content for the sake of it, just to constantly email people, because they will unsubscribe from you. What are the different record-keeping softwares and non-software techniques that are for world building, and the pros and cons of each? For example, using old-fashioned journal filling out, or templates, World Anvil, etc. So I'm just going to kind of lump in World Anvil with kind of any world building software, since that's the one that I'm the most familiar with, and I know there are others, but I'm not really familiar with them. I would say the pros and cons of each. So first of all, filling out in a journal or by hand, personally, I wouldn't recommend unless you know you like to do all your work by hand. Writing things by hand can get messy. You can't search in a document to find something. It can take a long time. You don't have a digital record of your work. If you want to change something, it can be very, very messy. With world building notes, you're probably going to be shifting and moving stuff a lot. So doing stuff by hand, writing by hand can be good for the initial brainstorming. It's not really what I would recommend for actual record keeping if you're making a world building Bible. As for using a word processor where you fill out templates, I think that that's a great middle ground option if you want something that is not too complex but still organized and you want something very customizable. For my fantasy book, I just use Word because I like to just have it very customizable, organized exactly how I like it to be organized. That's what I like. I don't like using software like World Anvil because first of all, it's just too complex and I find it overwhelming, and I feel like I spend more time navigating the software than doing my world building. And I want the focus to be on my world building, not on the software. So I just use my own templates in Word. And you can then, of course, customize it to have whatever you want in those templates, which is nice. The pro of World Anvil is just that it's so complex and it's great for very complex world building. If you have a really complex world, it's such a detailed software. It's definitely something I think worth checking out if you're writing in a created world. It's not for everyone. If you like that really complex, intricate organization, World Anvil is actually a great program for that. I also think a great option is just to do a combination of them all. If you like to do your initial brainstorming on paper, that's great. Then kind of doing the bulk of your world building in Word, where it's just more free-flowing, or any word processor that you use. Word is the most popular word processor, but whatever word processor you use, it's easy to move things around, shuffle things out, take notes, and then once you have all your world building done, transferring it into something like World Anvil, where you can create that super intricate world building Bible, might be a great option. We have a recent video on how to create a world building Bible, actually, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. Can you talk about what layout of your book should be before you send it to publishers or agents? Does it have to be double-line spaced? What is the best type of font to use? And what size? It should be double-spaced. It should be in a standard font like Times New Roman, and it should be 12-point font. We've got a video on how to format your manuscript that also links to a template that you can download if you want, and it's for like standard manuscript format that you should use when submitting, so I'll leave a link to that as well. Pros and cons of using a pseudonym. So the main pro of using a pseudonym is just that it keeps your work separate from your personal life. People won't be digging into your business. You know, you create a persona that is separate from yourself. You can be anonymous. If you really are a very private person and you want to maintain a sense of privacy, that's great. Maybe you want to separate your work from your personal career, you know? Maybe you have a professional career as an accountant, but you publish really steamy romance, and you just want to keep those two aspects of your life separate. Maybe you're just a very private person. Or maybe you kind of want to create a bit of a persona that's in line with your work, you know? For example, A Series of Unfortunate Events, written by Lemony Snicket, is not actually the author. That is a pseudonym, but not just a pseudonym, a bit of a persona, right? That is integrated into the series. The pseudonym that the author uses is actually a created character in and of itself. You know, maybe you're writing a fantasy book and you want to kind of create a persona, a character that is kind of almost in world. So those are some things that pseudonyms can be good for. Also, if you write in multiple genres and you just want to separate them. The main con of using a pseudonym is just that it's the opposite. You don't get credit for your work. People won't know that it's you, and maybe that's something that's important to you. You want people to know your work, you know? You want people to know that your work is your work. You want credit for it. It's something that you want to be connected to. It doesn't have to be an ego thing. You can just be proud of your work, and you want to be connected to your work, and you want people to know that your work is your work. You know, I think that there are lots of pros to using a pseudonym, but if none of them apply to you, you don't have to use them. I've started planning for my novel, and I'm still planning. My problem is, when should I just stop plotting and start writing? Note, I'm a plotter and I've not yet completed plotting for my novel. If you're a plotter and you're not done plotting, then that's just a clear sign that you're not done yet. I would say stop plotting and start writing at the point that you feel confident. When you've done enough pre-planning that you feel confident, then it's time. People can get caught in like a plotting loop, especially with world building, where they feel like they need to know every intricate detail. This probably is not necessary, but everyone is different. Everyone needs a different amount of planning to feel confident to start writing. Some people feel confident with no planning. Some people feel confident when they have very elaborate outlines and notes. So it's up to you. It's just what would make you feel confident and give you the tools that you need to write. And that's really just up to you, and it might take a bit of time to figure out what that optimal amount of planning is for you. But with every book you write, you'll get to know your process better. What should I do if I keep getting ideas for novels and can't stick to one book? It isn't working for me and I just want to finish my first draft. This is something that a lot of writers deal with. I would say the key to sticking with one novel is to not let yourself start writing your other projects, but still let yourself engage with them. If you're drawn to other projects, let yourself think about them, let yourself take notes for them, but just don't start writing it. Only let yourself draft one book at a time. In fact, starting the next book can become your motivation to finish the book you're writing, right? You're like, oh, I'm excited about these other books, but I have to finish the draft I'm writing before I can start them. Keep yourself limited to one draft at a time, but that doesn't mean that you're on total lockdown. You can still kind of work on other stuff in the note-taking and planning stage so that you kind of get the fun and the satisfaction of working on all these new ideas. It is a lot of just willpower to commit to an idea, and it can be tempting to want to start a new book. It's very natural. But use starting those new ideas as the motivation to finish your draft rather than letting them be the thing that's derailing it. Do you recommend starting out with flash fiction before moving on to short stories or novels? If you don't think that it'd necessarily be beneficial for most beginner authors, do you think it's still something that's worth trying? I think it is definitely worth writing short stories before you write novels. For a lot of writers, it's not necessary, but it helps. However, I don't actually think that writing flash fiction really prepares you to write a novel. Flash fiction almost can have more in common with a poem. it's such a brief capturing of a specific moment. It doesn't really have detailed character work or plot development. So flash fiction can be great, can be super fun. I love flash fiction, but I wouldn't say that it's actually the place to start. If you want to develop your fiction writing skills in a smaller format, I would start with short stories. So full stories that are like, 2,000 to 6,000 words long, or even a little longer, that have, well-rounded characters, multiple characters even, and multiple scenes and a clear escalation of plot. Flash fiction often doesn't have those things. So it can help you improve your prose, but short stories can also help you improve your prose. So if you want to work on a smaller form to get more confidence, get experience editing, get confidence finishing work, get feedback so you can improve your craft before you take on a novel, that is a great idea, but I would do that with short stories rather than flash fiction, just because flash fiction, I don't think really prepares you to write a novel. So that's all for the second part of this Q&A. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, bye.